Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
And
It says recording in progress.
Yeah, it's recording on the computer, so
Okay, we'll just go with that and
I'll try to
Figure out
find
how
it,
to
find out where it is when we're done.
so I'm gonna share my screen then. Where in the heck is it here? So fellas, good morning,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming you can see the screen, am I assuming?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's get started, and first of all, you can see that we are at week 155A.
Hey.
And for you, that's really bad news.
Is that legal?
Yeah, the reasoning behind this is because I think we are coming at a major interpretive point within John's gospel. And we're gonna dive into this idea over the next few weeks. And so today, we're gonna look at the overview of the text that I think is a really important portion of John's gospel account. It's unique to John's gospel account. Nobody else chose, none of the other writers chose this. And of course, we believe that there's an inspiration of the Spirit that prompted John to include this. And I think it is for a reason. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight, today. It feels like tonight. Because the sun's just coming up. But just bear with me. And I just find this absolutely fascinating. And we're going to look at it over the course of the next few weeks. So we're in the A presentation today. Last time, we looked at two different responses to the resurrection of Lazarus. And we would think that this would be a definitive moment, that everyone would get on board with Jesus and life would be happily ever after. That is not the case. And as I look at them, I gasp, as we looked at last week, but then without even a second breath, I'm thinking, this is me. This is really, when I'm looking at me honestly, it is me. And the me is, I too have experienced the fear of what if. I too have looked to find others to agree with me. I too have dialogued with others, resulting in conspiracy thinking. I'm guilty of that. I realize that. And I think I'm making an extrapolation that I think it's common to human, just being human. And that's what we're seeing demonstrated in the text.
I want a little more talk on conspiracy thinking to define that, because I think of it right now, because out there it's conspiracies of people trying to make kids gay or something like that.
Okay, the way it works in the church is, did you know so-and-so believes this? We can't allow that anymore.
It's a form of gossip.
Yeah, that's what it looks like in the church.
Okay.
There's lots of rift going on in the church today. A dialogue, a redefinition. This person is scary. This person holds to this. We can't allow that. That is conspiracy thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, and it permeates our lives. This person is scary. Yeah, you know what? That's what it looks like in a religious context. So let's read the text. And great question, thank you. 11:49 through 53 reads, but one of them, now remember, the crowd went back, they saw the resurrection of Lazarus, and they're coming back. A portion of that crowd who witnessed the resurrection of Lazarus, they come back and they report to the religious temple leaders what happened. And they are really nervous about Jesus at this time. We can't allow this man to continue. That's conspiracy thinking. One of them, a man by the name of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, important guy, said to them, quote, you know nothing at all. Picture a group of important people in their context, and they're arguing, what do we do about this Jesus? There's turmoil going on in the Jewish population. They're worried about Rome's involvement and coming in and snuffing the whole thing out. We're going to talk about a little bit more of the context. And then all of a sudden he gets up and he says, you know nothing at all, nor are you taking into account, that it is in your best interest, people, that one man die for the people, and that the whole nation not perish. Now, he did not say this on his own accord, and this is John's interpretation. But as he was high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation, and not for the nation only, but in order that he might also gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So from that day on, they planned to kill him. That is the interpretive. I look at it as the watershed in the gospel, that we're moving now. At this point, verse 53, we're moving from the public ministry of Jesus, moving into the passion narrative. At this point, at this juncture, they said, he's got to die. He has got to die. So that's what, that's why I view this in John's gospel is really an interpretive key.
He doesn't just have to die, he has to die for the nation. I mean, Caiaphas said that.
Yeah, and we're gonna talk about that. Why he even thought of that is really quite amazing. Now, John says there's another layer involved.
Right, but he
But
thought he was gonna bring Rome's hell down upon them, and he wanted to get them out of the way. He was thinking.
they're really worried about what's Rome gonna say, what's Rome think.
What's gonna happen?
That is, they are puppets. They view themselves as puppets. So here's the verse 49-50. But one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor are you taking into account that it is in your best interest that one man die for the people and that the whole nation not perish. Okay, what did he mean by that is what we're going to look at. Caiaphas, here's my point. Caiaphas was appointed high priest in the year 18 CE, 18 CE or AD. Under Jewish law or Jewish directive, Jewish law, the high priest term was for their entire life. However, while under Roman occupation, which is the context of the first century life, this office was subject to Roman approval, and thus the person could be removed at any time. If they didn't like, if Rome did not, if the people, the Jewish people, the population were agitated, and it had to do with the religious ritual, they would take that guy out. They want to snuff any kind of turmoil amongst the people, because it means that they got to deal with it, and they don't want to deal with it.
So like some places in the world today.
Yeah, I think it's all over.
You know, Mike, it's interesting, there's a conjunctive there. He says, you know nothing at all. That's a statement. He says, nor are you taking into account. So there's two things he's accusing them of. And I'm puzzled about the first one, you know nothing at all.
Yeah, well, you have more comment. I'm going to comment.
Well, I think he might take into account the scapegoat issue in Leviticus, but he's saying two things there. He's saying no nothing, and you're also not thinking about this thing. You know, I'm kind of thinking what the two things are and wrestling with that.
He's got something going on in his head.
Yeah, he does.
So he's there. What I attempted to do first of all just is the commentators really go off on this whole thing. Well, why is this like this? And the high priest was to life, and they're saying that according to that year, why would John say that? This is an explanation. Is the political, the context of the situation would warrant this kind of comment that, oh yes, he was there as long as Rome allowed him to be there. So he said that year it was Caiaphas. However, okay, I've got that. John's descriptive language in 49 and 51 is what that little paragraph says. Caiaphas is, now here's that other comment. Caiaphas's harsh comment in verse 49, you don't know anything, is in sync with how the Jewish leadership community would have spoke to each other within attempting to make their point. I've actually seen a yeshiva in process. It is amazing. Yeshiva is a place of dialogue where Jewish students and scholars sit around tables like this at the Moot, and they debate their points. So he's using very common, he's trying to get their attention.
We're kind of like that. It used to be more so or less, so depending on the subject.
Yeah, when I saw it, I saw a guy across the table pointing like this.
Yeah,
Have you seen it?
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're fully into it.
Yeah, they're really
I
into
remember-
the words of Moses.
I remember years ago, we had a newcomer come and he was real wanted to be welcome. We're talking and he made a point and then someone else here, probably John Eisner or somebody says, no, you're wrong about that. And then we started arguing. I thought, perfect. That's perfect.
Now, in a John Eisner kind of way.
Yeah, but John Eisner kind of way.
And then
It's
we had Steve Bolton.
Steve
here.
Bolton
We had
did that
Steve
too,
Bolton and John Eisner, yeah.
Jeez.
In verse 50, Caiaphas speaks a truth, which now this is my attempt at interpretation of this, and I'm not alone, guys. I read outside and so forth. In verse 50, Caiaphas speaks the truth, which is in his mind will allow the Jewish temple ritual to continue under Roman occupation. Through the practice of scapegoating Jesus, this is a major term, and we're going to look at Leviticus 16, the Jewish practice of scapegoat. Caiaphas knew, because he went through this every year on Yom Kippur, that there would be peace restored to the group through the scapegoating practice. Thus, his comments. Harmony among the Jewish population will be restored. Roman rule will be relaxed, so the temple formalities will be allowed to continue. So according to Caiaphas, he says, we need a scapegoat. And if one man, if this person, Jesus, is that scapegoat, it will alleviate and bring peace. He knows the scapegoating process, which is a shared turmoil within the group. It can be conflict, but in the scapegoating process, Leviticus 16, we'll look at that. It was a common shared sense of guilt and shame and sin. That sin was placed symbolically on one goat, and again, we'll look at the detail, and that goat was released into the wilderness, never to be seen again. The goat, you don't want the goat to come back, because then your sin comes back.
But you didn't kill it.
They didn't kill that goat, they killed another one. We're gonna look at that. But Caiaphas knew how this worked. He saw this year after year of the harmony that was restored amongst the group if one takes the blame. And here he's making this statement that John inserts exclusively, showing, in my opinion, why Jesus was taking the blame for the turmoil that was existing amongst the Jewish population. And Caiaphas was smart enough to know that if we just put this on one guy, harmony will be restored and we can continue with our formality.
But Jesus knew that too. It's almost like he was waiting for it.
Well,
That's
Yeah.
going ahead of the curve, but yeah.
This is that, yes, I agree, yeah. Jesus said, no one takes my life from me. I have authority to lay it down. I have authority to pick it up.
Right.
Now, that's my perspective.
Right, but when he laid it down, he, like a sheep for a shear silent, he just let them, he got quiet and let them beat him to pieces and kill him.
Yeah, yeah.
He submitted to it.
And I think it has a huge ramification on how you and I are to live. So that's why we're going to week 155A, and we'll keep talking. So in the next verse, it says, or no, this is continued. Caiaphas was applying a known truth. The known truth is the scapegoating mechanism. That's a key word that I want you to, we're gonna look at a thinker about this idea in about 2 weeks. Rene Girard. And he came up with this idea and he called it the scapegoat mechanism, almost giving it it's a process that these people were practicing from days of old, and they knew the outcome. Harmony. We restore the harmony. And Caiaphas just voices that, says, if one man dies, it's to your benefit, because we can come back together again.
Well, it's universal. I mean, it even supersedes the Jewish.
And we're gonna
Yeah,
talk about
yeah,
that too.
yeah.
The scapegoating mechanism had been part of the Jewish experience from the beginning. Now, this week, again, we're just looking at the text. And annually, now here's a little explanation, very little. Annually, on the Jewish Day of Atonement, the high priest would symbolically place the sin of all onto one. In this case, a goat. It's the idea of all and one. I just want you to think of the 30,000 foot perspective, all to one, or one for all, resulting in a restored but temporary. It's always temporary. They had to do it every year, always temporary.
So, Mike, would you say the Jews believed symbolically, or did they believe that their sins were, taken away?
Oh, I believe they had to believe it was actually happening, or it wouldn't be real. They had to believe it. Now, in the New Testament, we see a counter of that, and I think in Hebrews 10, it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sin. But in their minds, in their minds, John, it was real. And they could actually, it's taken away. That's why the scapegoat would never be thought of as coming back again, because their sin would return. The goat was taking, in their minds, the goat was taking their sins away.
But then.
Yeah, so for them, it wasn't symbolic then, right? So for them, it was reality.
The word symbolism here.
Right, but they emptied their bucket of sins and it's going to start filling up again. I mean, they knew this is a cyclical thing.
Yeah, they had to have an out every year. It's interesting to read this, guys, and if you want to read Hebrews 10 of the superiority of Christ over this whole idea. That's what the writer of Hebrews 10 in Hebrews 10 is talking about. But the point here is Caiaphas knew this. He knew the power of the scapegoat mechanism. I'm going to call it that, the scapegoat mechanism that is built much larger than the Jewish population. They didn't come up with this idea.
But he's doing two things at once. He's going to use a scapegoat, but he's also getting rid of this troublesome guy. It's sort of two things. I mean, he'll use the scapegoat as an argument for getting rid of this troublesome guy. And it's
what human nature does. When there's turmoil in the group, we have to we have to remove the perceived problem.
So we'll put it on so-and-so and be done with it.
And we'll put it on
Well,
so-and-so. Yeah. And we do it we do it in a violent sense when we have an enemy and we have to get rid of the enemy, and we do it in a religious context in numerous different ways. We do it in a familial context the problem is not me, it's my wife. We've got to find something to blame.
Well, I'm thinking historically, maybe it's from Shakespeare or not, but they were dealing with King Henry VIII, Thomas Becket being the Archbishop of Canterbury. And they were crossing at odds, and you couldn't just kill him. So he said it as, at least Shakespeare, in context of all the people surrounding him, said, will someone not rid me of this meddlesome priest?
Yes,
And so 4 guys went and killed him, and then he had them killed for killing Becket, because he says, I didn't give you a direct command to do that.
that is an example of the scapegoat mechanism.
Yeah.
An example. I've used the term here somewhere, removal. It's not always in the scapegoat of the scapegoat practice of Leviticus 16. The scapegoat was not killed. The other goat was killed as a sin offering, but the scapegoat was released, but released into a nowheresville, the wilderness.
Same as death in a way.
To me, it's a commentary on a life in a scapegoating way of thinking is nowheresville. It's just living in a grayness until next time. That's why it's so, but it's powerful, but it doesn't work.
Just so that damn goat doesn't come back.
Yeah, we don't want the goat to come back. So I think
Literally.
Caiaphas knew that if one can be blamed, then removed, there's that term. Then removed, in this case, it would be death. Peace can be restored to the whole. If peace is restored to the whole, Rome can then gladly stand down from their alert, allowing Jewish religious practices to continue. This is in Caiaphas's head, in my perspective. He wants his job. Major point. The scapegoating practice, which is one taking the blame for all, has many faces and has widespread application. The intent is always to restore a harmony to the group. This is what we humans do. Guys, this is not, from my mind, I'll make this statement, this is not a problem, this is the problem. This is it, from my view. And I think John is trying to communicate this to the first century. How do we think about Jesus? Think of it like this.
Isn't Jesus in a way agreeing with them?
Yeah, and he takes the whole thing and turns it on its head.
Yeah.
That's the power of what we're going to look at that. Yeah. Okay, so verse 51. Now, he did not say this on his own. Now, this is John, again, informing his audience. He's informing his audience the purpose of Caiaphas's words here, which is unique to this gospel. But as he was high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. Absolutely. And I left it there. I didn't continue because it says the others as well, but we're gonna look at that. John the writer includes this unique interaction at this time within his gospel account for the benefit of his first century readers. Now here's the we have the luxury reading this in the year 2022 to read his purpose. My purpose is this, and here he says it. In verse 20, 30, and 31, John says this. So then, many other signs Jesus performed in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in the book. He says, I could have written so much more, but these have been written. What he wrote has been written, so that why? You, first century church, may believe that Jesus is two things, is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life. You may have life in his name. This was his purpose. And this is taking, right here in John 11, it's taking his intent to its purpose. It's here, John 20:31, John states his purpose for writing the Gospel of John. He wants his audience to know that what he has chosen to include is for the intent that the reader may believe that Jesus is the one, and that through this belief, the reader may experience a new kind of life right here and right now. Right here and right now. And I think I've got a note here. Oop. My low battery. Jeez. It's my perspective that this section in 11:49 through 53 is an interpretive key for understanding the purpose of John's book. And then I got one more. And so, living in the 21st century, we naturally ask, in what way can a scapegoated Jesus that I think John is writing about provide a new kind of life for me in the here and now? That's the application.
You're getting into atonement theory.
Yeah, this is atonement. This is, yeah, we're going to talk about atonement theory. Yeah. And not for the nation only, but now I finish at 52, that he might also gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. So I think I'm about ready to lose my. Do you guys have any questions out there? Any comments or questions what we're talking about so far?
Yeah, you're pretty clear.
So, okay, I may lose you because my battery, for some reason, my battery.
You'll be on if on my machine. I'm the host, right?
You what?
I'm the host, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm on, it'll still be.
Oh, we could still talk. Okay. So, in John 11:52, not only for the nation of Israel, but for others who are called children of God and they're scattered abroad. You know, they're outside the Jewish hub in Palestine. It's here that John reinterprets Caiaphas' words to provide a fuller meaning of the cross event so his audience can understand what has occurred. John's stated reason for Jesus's coming death on the cross is to gather, here's the quote, gather together into one the children of God who are scattered abroad. There's a oneness intent of bringing together. We'll look at this in John 17 as well. It's bigger than just the Jewish nation, although it's inclusive of them, of course, because it's a human thing. This means that the intent for the coming cross event is to result in a comprehensive coming together of humankind into a oneness. And I've got Jew-Gentile, which is much of the argument of the New Testament writers. How do we integrate these two within the context of life here and now? I think this is important. There's nothing within this text which indicates that this oneness is to be removed from the now and transported. You know, when I die, I go to heaven. We put that in there. It's not in there. It's here. Jesus is talking about it here and now. Some cases it may include the future. I got here. The future can certainly be included, but the author is talking about right now. Their life was hell under Roman occupation, and God had given them this promise. They were asking God, "Where are you?" I mean, it was a rough, tumultuous time.
Here, but not yet.
And thus they were looking for a savior. Yeah. And not for the nation. Here's, I'm continuing on this idea of children of God, that the intent is for a gathering of the children of God. And who are these children of God? Here's a step. Broadly speaking, when the Bible talks about the relationship between God and those who are God followers, the term children of God is often used, or child of God. So there's the 30,000-foot view. I think of the term as describing a person or group who is consciously aware of values and practices which reflect the reality of who God is and what is actually true. That's a mouthful right there. It is therefore a term which indicates a relationship between God and a God follower of some sort, and the biblical writers have chosen the term, a familial term, child or children, children of God, because they're reflective of the family characteristic. The detail of this relationship varies. It varies widely. But is this person a God reflective kind of individual or not? And in my mind, it has very, very little to do with the idea, is Jesus God or not? It's not, in their mind, they're not thinking in those terms. Is this person reflective of God or not? But here's an example out of John. As many as received him, to them he gave the right. This is prior to the word becoming flesh in John 1:12, that throughout all of history, those who believe and put their trust in a God, becoming a God follower, are granted the right to become these children of God. And as many as those who believed in his name. I believe that's prior to the coming of Jesus of Nazareth in John 1:12, but there's that term. Note, in contrast, the biblical term, this is how to think about this. The biblical term fool is in contrast to child of God. And the term fool is most widely used in the book of Proverbs. It's one who doesn't share this way of thinking. They give way to a self-focused, narcissistic, very self-focused perspective on reality, which, according to the Bible, and I think it's true, leads to a painful and destructive outcome. So, child of God, in contrast to the biblical term fool, is how I would look at that.
So it's family versus me.
Family versus me, yeah. And yeah. Now, son of God, that's another term. We've got child of God, now we got son of God. When I read the term son of God, I think of it in a very similar way, as describing a person who is consciously aware of. Are you guys aware that son of God is used many times without attaching Jesus to it? It's
In the Bible?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. So I'm just trying to give some definition. When the term son of God is used in their minds, it describes a person who's consciously aware of being related somehow to God. When the term son of God is attached to Jesus, it describes his unique, definitely his unique, which is unique, and conscious relationship with the Father. Everything Jesus is speaking about is from the Father, going to the Father, and he's now living towards his hour, which is coming. That's his language. When Son of God includes the word Christ, Jesus's unique relationship with the Father is being expressed, along with recognition that he is the one they have all been waiting for. He is uniquely related to God, and he is Messiah. So that's in the text. So that's why we're drilling down into this. Now, as a converse to that, Son of God and Son of Man, those are not interchangeable. They're two different ideas in my mind. When the term Son of Man is used, I look at it as a bit different, and it's rooted when that term is being used and attached in the New Testament, the first century. I think it has a direct correlation to Daniel 7 in their minds. they know the biblical text. The Jewish population have read Daniel 7 numerous times, and they've seen that phrase. Daniel 7 is where a son of man or son of Adam is actually placed in the throne room of Almighty God with the Ancient of Days, and he is given all authority and power. Yeah, I know. In Daniel 7, Son of Man resides with the Ancient of Days. The Son of Man is given an everlasting dominion of which all the peoples of the earth will be oriented. When Jesus speaks of himself as Son of Man, I think it's this he's referring to. Jesus, like 80 times or something, referred to himself as Son of Man.
With this, their handling of Daniel in this second temple environment probably isn't much different than our handling of Revelation in our day.
Life is terrible and they want to be delivered. Where and when is the one who's going to come and set up this kingdom and wipe out the Roman power?
Yeah.
That's exactly how we think.
So today we say, come soon, Lord,
Come soon, Lord, and get me out of here.
get me out of here.
But then, but then we look for them. We are constantly attaching and reattaching physical people to that character.
Yeah, and it's
Lets us down every time.
it's the idea of being this hell. Life is going to hell in a handbasket. Come and save me. Get me out of here. And I think that has a lot of disadvantage.
I think right now, Russian Orthodox Church thinks Putin is the son of man.
Well, in regard to the term son of, and I'm kind of moving because my iPad's about ready to give up the ghost here. In regard to the term son of God, we talked about child of God, and son of man. In regard to the term son of God, I don't see automatically an automatic divinity being attached to the term. My mind, when I see a term, I want to attach a meaning. So when Jesus dies on the cross, the Roman guard says that was the Son of God. Didn't he say that? Son of God? Yeah. Well, what does he mean by that? Well, that means he's God. But I don't know if that's what he meant. I don't really, I think it was an honorable, something very honorable.
Well, if you're children of God, the son is a specific child, that still doesn't apply to divinity.
Right, yeah, that's, it's the whole idea here is just, God, what do we think about? What are we attaching that really isn't there, is the idea, and how do we understand this? The reason is that the term Son of God is used in a number of different ways. When this term is being used in relation to Jesus, I see Jesus's full humanity. See, I see it kind of differently here. His full humanity is being expressed. The word, comma, divinity became flesh. The word, John chapter 1, the word, divinity, became flesh, humanity. That is the incarnation, and that is a wow. The word became flesh. Jesus of Nazareth is the word fully dwelling within human flesh. He is the full manifestation of what it means to be truly human. That is really worth thinking about. He really shows us what it is to be human. So I'm going to end it there just because, I think next week we'll just kind of summarize it and wrap that up there. But man, we have talked about a lot of different things here. Guys, what are your thoughts?
Come on over here.
Yeah, what I'm going to. Yeah, I'll leave it on there. What are your thoughts on this idea? Oh, Vince, you're still here. Good. I couldn't see all of you there, so I didn't know who is here or not. But guys, we're talking about, we're doing some deep dive into this section, and we're maybe talking about stuff that, it certainly is interesting to me. But what questions or comments or yeah, what do we talk about?
So Mike, you are really impressed with the idea that Jesus is fully human. I think you've said that before. So maybe tell us a little bit more why you think that's so important, so valuable. So
That's a good question. I think it's extremely important because here's my thought on that. I think that we, through being human and experiencing the fallenness of mankind, we actually put ourselves in a position where we're less human. We're binded by our own neurosis, by our own sin, by our own conditions, and that Jesus has come to give us a way to move beyond that. And he uses the term freedom. He says, if you continue, you will be my disciple, my follower. And I think he really means that. And you will know the truth, which is actually what exists. And the truth will set you free. So that in itself would necessitate a bindedness that he views humanity as in a binded kind of shape. And I think it has to do with binded by our own ways of thinking, our own constructs. As we've seen here in the raising of Lazarus, we see people who actually saw a man raised from the dead, and they took it in a negative sense of how to process that. You think that, but boy, if we just believe Jesus was God, everything would be that's the solution. If we just pray a little prayer, here it is, pray a little prayer, then we go on with life and everything's cool. My goodness, there is a huge amount of woundedness among us as people in the church. And so Jesus being fully human displays to us, I think God in his wisdom gave us Jesus. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like to be fully human. And that's sorry, John, you asked me, so I thought I'd tell you, but that is in a small sense. I'll shut up now. That's what I think. What do you think?
I was didn't know what immediately came to my mind when you initially brought this point up is that actually Jesus became truly human in the sense of when God created man initially, when he created Adam and Eve initially, that they were human in the sense that they were without sin. And so that's what I just thought about, that he's the full manifestation of what's truly human in the sense of what God created man for in the beginning. That was my thought.
Yeah, I think, and
Yeah.
I can't do the time, and N.T. Wright talks about God saying, revealing his glory, man being fully human being as he was intended to be, as he was created to be.
Is that what he says?
Yeah, he considers that the glory of God is in a man being fully
Yeah.
human.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's a thing about a person being fully human must be free of all the stuff that makes us not human, which is a challenge. But the Son of God then also, man, I mean, the Romans all had the Son of God. God was Augustus. God went into the heavens. So all the emperors would lay claim to being the Son of God to give them a little extra oomph in all their decision making. So they all had a sense of the Son of God out there, but he's redefining the real God.
Yeah.
That was a divine so-and-so Tiberius, the Son of God,
Yeah.
it was very common. Yeah.
Mike, I guess this has nothing to do with the Son of Man or Son of God that we've been talking about. I'm having a little bit of trouble wrapping my mind around the scapegoat image that we're using, since the scapegoat itself was released, was sent away. And in this case,
Yeah.
Jesus more almost represents the goat that was killed and not the goat that was sent away. So I'm kind of having a harder time wrapping my mind around the scapegoat image that we're trying to get, that Jesus was supposed to have been to Caiaphas. I understand the modern term scapegoat is someone who takes the blame. But I just don't, I'm not sure if I'm missing something on this scapegoat, because if Christ really were the scapegoat, then they would have just tried to get rid of him, tried to send him away, not kill him. I'm not sure.
But
I'm tracking with that.
it's two different cultural thoughts. One is a scapegoat to substitutionary taking of sin and bringing it away. But Jesus was called the sacrificial lamb that was killed on the altar. So, I mean, it's a different
It was
cultural process happening. He was more along the lines of the ceremonial sacrifice that Israel was familiar with, and we use the term, I think Mike is using, and we're using the term scapegoat as someone who will take our place, put the sins on him and get him out of here. But when John the Baptist said, "Behold the Lamb of God," he identified Jesus as the Passover lamb. And the Passover lamb was slain. It wasn't sent into the wilderness symbolically. He was literally killed, spilling of blood.
I think all these.
And even in Leviticus, the one goat was killed and one goat was sent away. So I'm agreeing with you, Vince, that Christ was the one that was slain as the final sacrifice for our sins. I'm just not seeing in this case how Christ represents the scapegoat, it as it was described in Leviticus.
Let me take a stab at that. Jeff, that is a really astute observation. And actually, not that I'm astute, but I had the same question. And after reading outside of prior to Leviticus, my computer just died. After reading outside of Leviticus biblically, and then outside of that, the idea of removal kind of transcended that I blended the practice, in my mind, the practice of Leviticus 16 as a conglomerate of what Jesus was doing. And the major point that Caiaphas was making is that someone's got to take the blame and needs to be removed. In this case, it'll be death.
I got to take off, guys. So thanks for your prayer. Appreciate it. And I'll
Yeah,
catch
hope
you
it
next
goes
week.
well, Vince.
Thank you much.
Okay.
And we'll meet next week. We'll just Zoom next week. So I mean, I think we're all free to do with that whatever we wish, but I think your question is great. Why, if we're looking at the one being released in the wilderness, why not the one with the sin offering of the people, the other goat? And I've kind of relaxed that question in my mind, looking at what Caiaphas was talking about was the whole scapegoating mechanism, which involves one taking the blame for the all so that harmony can be restored.
Okay, yeah, I can grasp that. I was just struggling a little bit trying with
Yeah,
the
it's a great
terminology, I guess. So if I can take away if I can apply the modern day definition of scapegoat to that situation, then I can understand it a little bit more than as was described in Leviticus.
As I have thought about, you're right on, as I've thought about the modern way that we think of scapegoat, I think it really fits right here. I think it's,
Yeah.
I think the way we think about it and the way the first century, the author thought about it and how Caiaphas was thinking about it is exactly the same. And that's actually why I'm kind of being, looking at it from one, taking the blame for the all. Some place to place the blame.
Right.
That has serious ramifications.
The Passover lamb negated the need for a scapegoat.
Right.
With Jesus taking on the sins of the world, we no longer need a scapegoat. And I think part of what the tie that I think Mike is trying to make is because we're called to walk in the here and now, we need to understand that we don't need a scapegoat either.
Right.
We spend so much time and energy judging, blaming, castigating, whatever, and those are all the things that Jesus told us not to do.
You're dead on. I mean, that's exactly what.
And we've become so entrenched in in this line of thought. For one thing, we've become so entrenched in this, as Mike said at the beginning. If somebody is particularly quote unquote different in their perspective of a scriptural issue or a civic issue or whatever thing, we immediately say no. And then effective communication and healing and everything else, gets thrown out. The baby gets thrown out with the bathwater, so to speak. And what Jesus is saying, no, I took care of all of that. So don't keep carrying that around. I took care of all of that. You don't need a scapegoat. I was your scapegoat. I did it all. It's all taken care of. Walk in that, not in our fleshly issues. I gotta go to.
You have said that way better than I did. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm reading Leviticus on all this and it's lengthy, but it is interesting. They take by lot, they have two goats. They choose one by lot. And so one's a scapegoat, one's a live goat, and they do a whole bunch of stuff for the blood and the sacrifice, the horns of the altar. They kill the one goat for the sins of the community. Then they go to the other goat and they acknowledge all the sins, lay it on the goat and do that, and they send it away. So it's a bit confusing. Why do you have to have two?
Okay.
What's going on?
Okay, this ties into, I'm gonna give you my perspective on this.
Okay,
And Jeff, it ties exactly into your question.
take care, Dave.
In the Leviticus 16 account, you're exactly right. There were actually 5, we're gonna look at this, but one goat was killed as a sin offering for the people for their sin, and the other one was let go in the wilderness to never, key point, never to return again. That as far as the east is from the west, that whole idea. And they needed 2 goats in order to demonstrate that idea. The beauty of Christ dying as a scapegoat, who is the last scapegoat, he does not die as a victim. And he returns through the resurrection, which is not part of their thinking. This is how he turns the entire idea on its head and overpowers it as a conqueror. The scapegoat returns, but their sin does not return because he has pronounced forgiveness to them. Father, forgive them. As the victim on the cross, scapegoats don't talk. He spoke. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And their sin, he's returned, and their sins are forgiven.
It's interesting, and there's another take on this. It's a little controversial, but the whole sacrifice system going way back was God talking to the people through something they understood. He didn't initiate it. He was using something that was in play by all the pagan cultures. And he was defining it tighter so they wouldn't go on and on and on and wonder if their sacrifices were fulfilled. And then once Jesus comes, he's saying, you know, we're laying all that down. That was never my intention to begin with. You know, that's
You mean the sacrificial?
sacrificial system.
Yeah.
That I was speaking to you through a culture you understood, so you would understand and wouldn't be burdened by it. But I got something that is of me that's much better. And they said the sins sacrifices are done away with, not so much because Jesus came as the ultimate sacrifice, which he was, but because it was never his intention to do that in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, that's a leap for a lot of people,
Right.
because what do we do with it? I mean, God required the blood of the lamb. Well, did God require it, or did he allow them to go through this whole thing?
Right.
I mean, that's the question.
There's
And
some-
the New Testament enforces that idea. It says the blood of bulls and goats never have taken away the sin.
Right, and
Yeah.
and I do not require a sacrifice, but I require,
Yeah.
even the Old Testament has allusions to this.
But they needed it.
But they needed it.
Yeah. So, but that is a big hermeneutical or a biblical leap for us to, well, then how do we understand the Old Testament?
Steve, our seminarian, any
Yeah, come on,
thoughts here?
Steve.
Step up to the plate.
You're talking, I mean, we're talking about philosophy and anthropology, and you're the guy here, so.
I can't enter into this any more than you guys have already brought me into it. You know,
Is the essence of humility.
well, yeah.
All right, Steve, I got a question for you then.
All
So-
righty.
So Mike is saying Jesus is fully human. And I think one of the major themes through the Gospel of John is the deity of Jesus.
Yes.
That Jesus, you know, is the God man. Is it possible that Jesus is fully human and fully God at the same time?
Well,
That's the hypostatic union.
yeah, by faith, I say yes.
That's a subject.
That,
But
yeah,
to explain the mystery, yeah.
I mean, there's
There-
volumes
there's-
written on that.
There's a whole, yeah, how do we get our arms around this? But, you know, to take us down a rabbit trail here, I think the fully humanness of Jesus is, I guess, sort of something that I don't usually concentrate on in the Christmas season. Because to me, the Christmas message is, God becoming flesh. But here's another take on this thing, to think about his humanity as being fully fulfilled in him. That's another aspect, I guess, maybe of the Christmas story that we don't hear about too much, that might be good for us to ponder.
Those comments right there. I don't deny the deity. I mean, I don't fully understand it. But it's the humanity of Jesus that has really enamored me. And that he really shows us what this is like.
And didn't the idea is the deity of Jesus kind of evolved as the church evolved, and it didn't just jump out right away. Church met, and this was something they had to think about for a few dozen years.
Oh, yeah,
The Trinity.
the Trinity doctrine isn't in this text.
Right.
I mean, they haven't come up with that yet. They had to derive that, Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Right, that kind of evolved.
Yeah.
Because eventually there was a whole, I mean, there was a big sector of the Christian faith, basically, Mediterranean, that thought Jesus was God's first act of creation, and then he created the world and everything, but that he was not God, he was the Son of God. Well, that was Arianism. And that caused the whole Nicene Creed to come about because Constantine wanted to settle that once and for all. But it survives among the Jehovah's Witnesses to this day.
This,
Yeah,
this-
I had a thought, Mike. on
Yeah, go
on this. And I'm showing my age now because it's trying to leave before I can express it.
Hey, Jeff, it gets
No.
worse, man.
It gets worse.
Yeah, I know. So So Christ, the fully God and fully man concept to me is that our sins required not just a sacrifice, they required a perfect sacrifice. Christ in humanity, I don't believe could have been that perfect sacrifice without him also being fully God, because the fully God portion of that is what brings about the perfect sacrifice versus just a sacrifice. So I don't know if that explains anything to anybody, but to me, it means that without the deity, then the sacrifice that Christ made being fully human would not possibly have been a perfect sacrifice. And that may be sacrilege. I don't know.
Oh, you're wrong, Jeff. You're totally wrong.
I appreciate your courage. I mean, these are really, and there's volumes and volumes written about this, this whole, Christ being fully God and fully human.
Yeah,
at the same
and
time.
I was teasing, I was trying to make this more of a yeshiva we talked about earlier on.
Well, fellas, we're gonna move on. We're gonna wrap it now because it's a little after 8, and we're gonna meet next week. We'll Zoom. We won't meet here at the Moot next week,
Okay,
and we'll Zoom and we'll wrap this one up. But we're gonna move into this whole idea because I believe that this section is an interpretive key that's gonna give way into the passion. And really,
Okay.
and we know the story. It's not like we don't know the story, but be able to understand the words of Jesus when he talks about what he's going to talk about. And I think it's life-giving to you and I. It's important.
I don't want to guess where you're going, but this is gonna change our feeling of the atonement. That it has a lot of ways to look at it. And one way we've always looked at it being God shot a bullet and Jesus took it for us.
Yeah.
Might be laid down because that's sort of a violent version of God hating us until someone else takes our sin. And
So, yeah, so Jeff, I just want to, before they hang up on us, I want to say I agree with you.
All righty, you guys have a good week and we'll see you next Wednesday via Zoom. So bye for now, guys. Thanks for joining in and your patience. Really appreciate
Totsy, be careful skiing, Totsy.
Okay, I'm going tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Medicine
Went
ball?
last week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the goal is to survive and be able to walk when you're done. Remember that.
Make sure you want to do it again. So
Where you going? Todd?
We're going to Loveland. That's the
Loveland,
only
okay.
place I have a pass, actually. They're in snowy range, I'll be the only place.
it's kind of fun.
Yeah, but it was cold and it's gonna be cold tomorrow, so I gotta be careful.
it's not cold, you're just
Yeah,
not dressed
that's-
right.
Right.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Okay.